I think we are live. Back with you, another episode of Looking for Work. So I do this every week. We do it live. If you are just catching this on a replay at some point in the future, um, we've got I got a whole YouTube channel full of these. So dig in and then meet us on a Tuesday, 12 o'clock noon Pacific, and ask your questions live. This is a great opportunity for you to just get some insight from someone that my background is software engineer for a really long time. I've helped lots of people transition into tech careers, helped lots of people land their first job in tech, having previously, no tech experience before, obviously training and preparing for tech role. So more than happy to volunteer my time, answer some questions, no strings attached. It's free. I'm not going to send you a bill in the mail. We'll do a little tune up on your process and get you good to go. At the end of the day, this is, I think, not as intuitive as most people think. So I was reading and responding to some LinkedIn today, and there's people that are somewhat frustrated by the process, which I get 100%. It is mind-numbingly difficult for the first gig. But after you land your first job in tech, then it's like for the rest of your life, you're never going to have to worry about a job search. Because like the rest of your life, people are going to be competing and like falling over themselves to try and poach you or pamper you. So it's just this one time. It's just the first one that is the most challenging. And then after that, everything else just gets way, way easier. So that said, buckle up because it is tough. The first one is a challenge. And then the reality is after that first one, you have enough work experience that you should be in a good spot for just doubling down on, okay, this is what I did previously, what's the best transition, etc. So first question we have is someone interested in the apprenticeship program. So no, you do not need to resend an email. We are a little backed up on sending people offers for interviews, but we will be interviewing more people. We've made several hires. So hang tight. There's a lot of demand for the apprenticeship, but this is sort of part of that job search process that you have to kind of think about it from the employer standpoint. We are definitely short-staffed, which is one of the reasons why we're hiring. It's also just part of the nature of what we do as an apprenticeship. And so it may not be on your time frame or like as fast as you'd like it to be, but it does take a little while to align all the resources and get people to sign off on, okay, these are the individuals to bring in for interviews. So I'd be patient. No need to continue to send emails. If you've already sent one, you're good. If you've already applied online, you're good in terms of applying with us. So if you have other job search questions, happy to provide assistance, but hopefully that alleviates a little stress for some people in that it's just like any other business. We have to have the right number of people able to commit time to do interviews, and there's bandwidth issues. I wish I could just not just interview people all day but hire people all day, because I feel like everybody I talk to, I am usually like very interested in hiring and bringing on and giving opportunity, but we just can't do it for everybody. So there are some limits to our resources. That said, I'm not seeing us live on LinkedIn, so I don't know what the deal is with that. Is LinkedIn working? Is LinkedIn not working? Let's just click the go live again and see what we get here. Come on, LinkedIn. Help us out. I see no notification that we're live. Still no notification that we're live. Is LinkedIn live? If anybody's on LinkedIn and they can see me right now, drop me a message, drop me a comment so I know LinkedIn's live. Otherwise, the LinkedIn peeps are going to totally miss out on this. I don't see it. That's so weird. There's notification. And I'm live. All right. It's like the validation that I needed in life. There's just a little notification banner, right? So if you have a question, please feel free to drop it in the comments. So in the little comment window on either LinkedIn, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook right now, or even on Periscope and Twitch. If you have a comment, the easiest way to get it to me is just drop it in the comment field. If you have a question, drop it in the comment field. and then it will come to me, not instantaneously. It usually takes about 60 seconds or so. So once you drop it in there, give it a moment or so, and then once I see it, I'll bring it up on screen, I'll read it out, and take my best guess at trying to provide some assistance. I do have some leftover questions that people have emailed, so in the event that people need to like take some time to compose themselves or are joining us late, then feel free at any point. While I'm talking is usually a great time to drop your comments and questions in there. That way I can get to them and not have a pause in between the questions. So while I start answering one, great time to compose your thoughts and your question. That way, as soon as I finish answering the first question, we can just rip through as many as possible in the next hour. So that said, some of the leftover ones that I apologize we did not get to last week, I will answer those plus the ones that have come in since then, and then answer any questions that come in while we are live, which is the main priority. So I'm going to prioritize the live questions as they come through, or at least best attempt. So that said, question I have left over is, I've often heard that I should ask questions at the end of the interview. What are some good questions to ask? Good question about questions. I like that. I see what you did there. Question about questions. So yes, I think it's helpful for you to, if they haven't answered some of the questions you have, take that opportunity and sort of, again, make sure this is a good fit, that you're getting questions answered that help you decide if this is the kind of offer opportunity that you'd like to accept. I often have people accept offers and then afterwards ask me questions, and I'm like, yikes, you probably should have like clarified that before you accepted an offer. So try and get especially the logistic questions out of the way if they're needed. So try not to like fish for, so when will I be hearing back from you? Not a good question to ask. A better question is, if I were selected for this role or position, would I be working on a team, and who might I be working with, or would I be working on my own? Right? It's a question that like is genuinely going to help you to understand what your work situation is going to look like and help you evaluate, are you going to get enough support as a new developer if you're working on your own versus if you're working on a team? So try and make sure the questions that you're asking during the interview are really thoughtful. So they should be based on what you've learned so far. Maybe go into the interview with a few questions that you've been able to maybe research and have some gaps and still don't understand. And if during the interview there are some pressing concerns, but try not to make it focused on things like benefits, right? I've had people ask those kinds of questions, and it's okay to ask, like, does this job include healthcare benefits, right? That might be just a total compensation type question that you have. But then beyond that, you probably will want to pause and wait until you actually have an offer, right? So it's okay to ask, do you have healthcare benefits? Probably not a great idea to ask if you have like an HMO or PPO, right? Like that's not the level that you want to be at on this first engagement with someone and before you have an offer, right? Because this is going to really make a difference if it's an HMO or PPO healthcare plan once you actually get the job or a job offer. Probably not. You're probably going to take it regardless of those options. So try and make sure the questions are, like I said, are like relevant and help you to make a decision about whether or not this would be a good fit for you. So hopefully that helps. I know that was delayed a bit since it's been on our queue for a bit now, but I think a good thing to be thinking about in advance, preparing for before the interview. Question, and this one is related to networking. So it says, what is the best way to network at an event? Should I hand out business cards? I like it. Prepared. So you can, I would say, don't go through extra effort to get like business cards printed. But if you have business cards, I think it could be helpful as a way for someone to be able to like reach back out to you. But what I like to do is really just have organic conversations with folks, and in many ways try and figure out like what would be a meaningful way for you to re-engage with them later. And that might be like, hey, it'd be great to see you at another meetup. Are you coming to this meetup again next month? Or what other meetups do you participate in? And make it a little bit less focused on like handing out cards, because I guess it implies like at some point you expect to like contact them again or them to contact you. And so if you are at that stage where you're like, hey, I'm working on some open source projects, I'd love to collaborate with you, then it's really like just exchanging your email. And you could probably facilitate that without a business card with just LinkedIn or GitHub. And you could just like, hey, what's your GitHub username, and like their GitHub. So then, you're able to connect with them more easily. So I wouldn't go out of your way to like get business cards printed. If you have them, great. But I would try and make the conversation more interesting and have a reason other than just like handing cards to people, right? Like, hey, this is me. That's what I do. I have seen that before, though. I've seen people especially at meetups, I've seen people with interesting types of cards, like, transparent cards or different shapes and things like that. So it is kind of an interesting way to exchange your information, but I don't think critical or should be something that I would invest a lot of time in unless you've already done it, right? It's probably not it's not a great investment. This is, again, where I might differ from the advice other people give. I try and really focus on like, what is pragmatic advice that you can take and implement that's going to give you a higher yield for the amount of time that it takes and effort that you'd have to put into it. So probably not a lot of yield out of creating fancy business cards. Probably better time spent doing other activities that I usually recommend, like time you spend reaching out and researching organizations and trying to connect with people inside the organization. That could be a more valuable use of your time. Roberto asked another question. Any tips to make your resume stand out? Yes. Less is more, in my opinion. For a person that doesn't have a lot, if you're looking for your first entry-level career or entry-level role in software engineering, then I would try and make it like super vanilla, super plain. And frankly, like, you're kind of wanting the opposite of stand out. In fact, you want basically the person to say, okay, this person is one that I can see has a passion for coding. You probably have listed some of your passion projects on it. You've listed your background, your education, whatever it is that leads the reader to believe that you have the skills necessary. And then try to make it like as like vanilla and plain as possible. And in that way, it does kind of stand out, because it's not sort of like what a lot of people would anticipate, which is like, you're just going to try and fill the page with a ton of stuff and add fluff and add this big paragraph at the top about how you're a scrappy, go-getter individual, passionate, gritty, and use all of these like buzzwords. Like, none of that stuff is super relevant when someone is considering hiring a brand new developer, someone that doesn't have a lot of experience. I expect to see your resume is going to be kind of short and might not have a lot of information on it. So if it's just clean, crisp, very well organized, that will actually make your resume stand out from the people that are trying to use all sorts of creative, like colors and stars to show the level of interest in different technology stacks or levels of proficiency with things like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's like, you're beginner, like the level of proficiency you're going to have between each of those, it's probably like negligible in comparison to someone that might spend, 10 years, 20 years, and they might say, well, I've got 15 years of experience with back-end C# services and 5 years of experience on front-end web development, right? The difference between like the 3 months that you spend on front end and the 3 months that you spend on full stack is probably negligible. So to make your resume stand out, I would actually try and do the opposite. Make it blend in. You want it to be like a gray car, because your resume is most likely not going to win you any opportunities or any calls as an early career developer. It can help you lose the opportunity, right? If it's like things are just not aligned, it's kind of messy, it's hard to scan and understand like where you're at and see those like bits of passion that are going to come through, then instead of being a gray car, you're like a dumpster fire. And I'm just like, okay, I can't do anything with this resume. I don't want to talk to this person. So you just want to be like a gray, neutral car, nothing good, nothing bad. I can tell this person's got some passion, got some experience. Now let me go to their GitHub. Now let me go look at their portfolio. And that's what's going to clinch it and get them to like want to get on the call with you and find out more why you might be the person for this role. That's my take on it. That's what I tell people. It's like, you make your resume stand out by being the gray car and not the dumpster fire. Because everybody's trying to do it. They're trying to put their picture on it. They're making it colored. They're making it very graphical. Like, I don't think that's necessary. Oh, man. Camera fail. All right. We're back. Stephanie asks, during an interview, it is established that you don't have experience using the company stack. How much time is it acceptable to learn a new language once hired? Good question. It's actually probably going to take you less time to learn and become comfortable in the language than the business itself. So the fear, and this is again not intuitive, but the fear you should have is really understanding their business and being able to add value and understanding their customer and understanding how their overall business model works might actually take you significantly longer than learning the technology stack, because hopefully at this point you're good at like picking up and understanding the patterns and understand how, fundamentally how different languages work and how they interact with APIs, etc. So I would really focus on, if you're going to think about what should I be trying to get mentorship and trying to really get an understanding of and development, it's really more about the business itself. And I would say 6 months to a year. That's reasonable. I think a lot of people think you're going to come in and I'm just going to crush it in the first few months. I'm going to start learning and understanding, et cetera. But even a senior engineer, it's going to take a good 6 months to really understand the business, unless they're coming from a competitor. And then they might have that advantage. They understand the space really well. I think for most folks, 6 months is reasonable. You should anticipate 6 months before you can even really tell if somebody's going to be like a great fit in the organization and like be a superstar, or they're just going to be an average and they'll be a mid-level at some point and eventually they get to senior, or someone's going to come in and you'll know like, oh man, they're just going to be like, they're going to run teams at some point. Like this person is going to be a leader within the organization. But you can kind of figure that out. Usually, like I said, so within 6 months, I think you'll have a handle on the language. For sure. Robert says, yeah, give it a try. See if it works. Do some experimentation. Try and change things up just a little bit. Especially with your resume. It's very easy for you to like make a clone of your resume, make some adjustments to it, get some feedback from some people, see what they say. The resume part, you should probably already have a few versions of your resume that focus in for the different types of roles if you're applying for slightly different types of roles, like a full stack role versus a front end role, right? You might have a slightly different resume for those two, depending on which opportunity you're going after. And if you're going for a front end, then maybe you might want to do a clean, more visually interesting resume. But for the most part, when I look at a resume of a beginning person, I'm just looking for like, where are the holes, right? Where is it like not aligned? Are they using different font sizes? Or they're using different, or they're spelling errors? Like that's a really easy way for me to tell who doesn't have the attention to detail and who's like just phoning it in versus someone that's got it dialed in and it's taking the time to get it reviewed by one or more people. So it looks clean. It looks like, okay, this is a beginner. Great. I got that perfunctory stuff out of the way. There's nothing you're going to put on there that's going to like amaze me as a beginner, right? Because you don't have any experience. There's nothing you're going to be able to put on there and be like, oh man, I got to hire this person and get him in here. If you get lucky, maybe your background, whatever you were doing before you went into tech, aligns with the business. But like beyond that, I just want to see like, can I get to the places where I want to get to and really figure out what your talent and skill is? Where's your portfolio? I'm kind of using it as a roadmap to figure out, okay, where's the portfolio? Where's the GitHub? What's the background story? How long have you been in tech? How did you learn? As long as I get all that stuff, I'm good. Now I'm ready to go on to the other research that I'm trying to do to figure out if this person is worth bringing in, having a conversation with. That's how I look at it. Again, remember, this is one person's opinion, but when I'm hiring, those are the kinds of things I'm looking for. From a beginner, I'm looking for, okay, this person, here's their experience. This is where they learned. And this looks like it was well-crafted. They attention to detail. They showed some resourcefulness by putting on here this, and this. Okay, this makes sense. Now, what are the other pieces? Joel, what is a good way to get noticed by employers despite attending a small, not well-known university? Well, if you have attended a university, you do have an advantage, right? So there's a significant edge to anybody, even if you have not completed the CS program. If you're trying to get into tech and you have gone through any kind of a formal program, you're gonna be sort of at the front of the pack. That doesn't mean you've already won the race, but it does mean that it's gonna be easier for you to kind of get out there quick and establish that you could be one of the people that is worth the time and investment to bring in and have an on-site interview or phone interview. So in terms of how to stand out, so I guess when you're talking about well-known university, I think for a lot of organizations, they're degree snobs, right? Not only do they want to have a CS degree, but it needs to be from like a prestigious institution. Those ones is going to be hard. Like the resume is not going to be the thing that you can do to like elevate yourself, or talking about your school is not the thing you're going to do to elevate yourself. You're going to need to elevate yourself in other ways. You're going to need to talk about what are the other skills you bring to the table and sort of find other ways to accentuate your profile because you don't have that prestigious degree. So frankly, it's not all that it's chalked up to be. And for organizations that are making that their priority in their hiring decisions, may not be the greatest companies to work for, because I think that's a pretty weak way to evaluate whether or not someone's qualified for the job. To say, well, they went to an Ivy League school or they went to a top tier tech school, so they must be more competent and capable of doing this job than someone that went to like a state school. Come on. Like at the end of the day, that doesn't tell you much other than how much they paid. And maybe the quality of the instruction that might have been available to them and the resources. But there could have been someone that was like way more scrappy and got way more experience and did more. It's been contributing to open source and has been working on, all sorts of passion projects the entire 4 years. I would hire that person in a heartbeat over someone that went to a more prestigious and well-known university. So to get noticed, I would say do all the fundamental things that you would, even if you didn't have a CS degree, which is work on projects. Make sure that you're writing code. Like it says, you need to always be coding, right? So you're not going to be able to just show the piece of paper with a fancy Ivy League on it. Not be able to show that MIT, that Cornell, right? That Stanford, Cal Poly. But it's just as valuable to show, here's my portfolio, here's some things that I've built. That's how you impress the nerds. Robert asks, what are some of the obstacles people face when making a career change in the industry? The biggest one that I found is that it's a tough balance between being able to support yourself while you're going through a program and being able to spend the intense amount of time it takes to prepare for a software engineering challenge or career. So I mean, and I say that because I've railed on this before, but I'll just kind of reiterate that why I think it's so hard for people that are in part-time programs is because you really have to gain enough time every day working on learning software engineering for you to make it stick. And if you don't work on it enough every day for a consistent enough period of time, you just never get to that like traction, and you never get over the hump and get to the point where it's like, okay, things are really starting to click and you get that aha moment and things just sort of start making sense. And so for a lot of people, they think, well, I can't do this full time because I just can't afford it. And then they try and do it part time and they struggle with it because it's just hard. Life is just in the way of being able to spend as much time as they need. And so from my perspective, the biggest obstacle for the vast majority of people I've met in the past is just the ability to dedicate the amount of time necessary to become somewhat decent at software engineering is a hurdle to people that are already working somewhere else or doing something else. So if you have the time and the space to set aside to learn over a compressed period of time, that would be ideal. But that also means that in order to do that effectively, you need to have like pretty dialed in curriculum. And there are some schools that provide like curriculum online that you can take for free and you don't have to pay anything for it. If you just self-study, you can access it for free. The best resource for free would be Free Code Camp. Free's in the name, so that's good. So you go through the Free Code Camp curriculum. There's tons of ways that you can gain those skills. But the overarching thing I hear from a lot of folks is just like it's exceedingly difficult because it just takes a long time. And when I say that, I mean like it's also repetition. Like anything that you need to build up a habit with, you got to put it in the reps, right? So over the COVID little break that we've had, I learned how to drum. I'm pretty decent. Maybe a professional at some point in time, who knows? But one thing that I found super interesting, even though I talk and I've told people this for years now, like you got to give yourself time and be patient with yourself, and this is going to take a long time. And I just really remembered the first few months, I was like, I'm using this software tool and there's levels in it. And I was like on level 1 and then 2 and then 3. And then it got really hard and you got to level 4. And I just remember thinking in my head, oh my God, I'm only on level 4 and there's like level 13. Like, this is impossible. I'm never going to be able to do this. And I found myself saying all this like garbage to myself about how this is going to be impossible and hard to do, that I hear people saying all the time about software engineering when they're learning. And it's just like, you gotta get rid of all of those negative thoughts and replace them with, it just takes time, it just takes reps. And I amazed myself, I surprised myself that after many months I was playing level 3 songs really easily and moving on to level 4 songs and level 5 songs. And now it's like I can play level 12 and level 13 songs. And I was like, there's no way I'll be able to do this. Like, this is just impossible, right? And you just very quickly, if you can find that thing as your anchor, use that to get through the rest of the process, because that is the biggest obstacle. It is people. It is you. It is the lack of patience people have. It is the fact that this is really hard and hard to sort of like facilitate, get the time to be able to do. And so if you can do it super slow, like a slow cooker, you can do it like over 2 years. Awesome. You can do it by just working on passion projects and things that interest you. Awesome. That's how a lot of people used to do this, right? Way back in the day. There was computers first came out. There wasn't a lot of software. So if you wanted a program, you had to write it yourself. And so a lot of people were just self-taught. And it takes a long time. But if you give yourself the patience, you're going to be fine. Everything else, when people talk about like frustrations with the job search, sure, the job search is super hard. But then there's resources like this. There's people like me that will like happy to answer questions and help guide you through the parts that are not as intuitive as one might think. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so Joel asks, that makes sense. Thank you. Also, are your apprenticeship programs available for Canadians? If so, how do I go about applying? Not yet. So I hope one day we can be international, and I think it does make sense for us to go to our near partners, Canada and Mexico, soon. Next, I don't know, but not yet. So you have to be a U.S. citizen at this point, because both of our programs are both the state of California and the Department of Labor require that they participants are eligible to work in the United States. So it's a current constraint, but we do a lot of business with businesses that are in Canada, or we have a lot of conversations with businesses that are in Canada. And so I think it's likely we'll get there sooner rather than later. Hopefully that gives you hope. All right. Any other questions? I got a few more. And then the backlog is clear. Now it'll be fun. Okay, so Robert asked about the apprenticeship. Is the apprenticeship done in person or remotely? It depends. If you're here in San Diego, we do have 2 offices that folks can go in and work out of the office, or are expected to work out of the office, because it's just way easier for everybody. So if you're in San Diego, in person. If you're not in San Diego, then it would be remote. And we have folks all across the U.S. So, yeah. Appreciate you understanding. We got to walk before we can, or we got to crawl before we walk, and we got to walk before we run. But I would like to see us providing apprenticeships worldwide, globally, because I feel like it fits in most economies. It's kind of hard to do here in the U.S. It's way easier to do in like Europe and the UK, where they're more familiar with the apprenticeship pattern across technical roles, and the government is also much more efficient in terms of investing in this, the same way they here in the US invest in like post-secondary institutions in the student loan space. So I'll leave it there. I'll say space, student loan space. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see that this could work, especially with like Starlink. If anybody knows what I'm talking about with that, it's like the satellites that should bring internet connectivity to people that are in very remote and austere conditions where there's not local infrastructure for internet. I think once we get to that point, we'll have a lot of democratization of both technology creators, because we'll just have way more technology creators, and it'll be easier for us to educate people that are in conditions that just don't permit a lot of great high speed 5G fiber type networks. So it's coming. Elon's bringing it to us. Okay, couple other questions. Talked about business cards. How do I pick what companies to apply to? Should it be based on what I studied during my boot camp? Great question. I always recommend to folks that they don't really think too much about learning more or new languages when you've completed the program, because you should have learned the fundamentals, and those will translate pretty efficiently to what a beginner might be required to learn if the shop uses a different language or a different tech stack. So if you learn, let's say, Ruby on Rails, and that's a great teaching language, a great thing for you to understand the fundamental concepts, but may not be used in industry as much as it once was, you don't need to go out and learn, C# for you to be able to land a job at an enterprise organization. You will be able to pick up C# if they have prioritized hiring for people with talent and skill versus people having that specific background or experience. So if they're looking for an entry-level developer, they might be perfectly fine that you have one language under your belt if they don't care that it's C#. So I wouldn't worry too much about picking and choosing companies based on the technology stack. Just make sure that you are taking into consideration that some may think that that specific language is more important than you might. So some will view it the opposite way. Some will say, well, you don't have any language specific, and we don't have the time, bandwidth, or capacity to ramp you up on that language. We don't believe you can get there in this period of time. We just want to hire somebody that already has C# experience. So I think it's a pretty short-sighted way to look at an early career developer. But beyond how I think about it, if that hiring manager thinks that, just be prepared for that. And there will be some folks that are just going to say, no, we want somebody who already has some prior experience. But I think most people that are open to hiring early career developers will be flexible. So I wouldn't worry about aligning what you studied in your bootcamp with the types of jobs that you apply for. Make sure that you feel like it's reasonable, right? So if you've studied web development, you probably don't want to be applying for embedded device software engineering, because it's a very different domain space and takes a little bit more knowledge and experience. But other kinds of web development languages and stacks, completely fair game. 100% fair game. All right, Robert asked another question. I was thinking about going back to school. Do not want to go the CS route. Is a CIS degree valuable at all? Sure. A lot less valuable in terms of demonstrating that you have an understanding of the computer science principles. So if you're trying to use your degree or going back to school as a mechanism to speed up the job search process, I wouldn't go for a CIS degree. So CIS is Computer Information Systems, and it's sort of like a less rigorous technical degree than a computer science or computer engineering degree, right? So if you're going to put the time and effort in, I'd go after the one that's going to give you the best chance of getting a foot in the door of many more organizations. And I think the CIS degree is not going to open as many doors as a pure CS degree. But you got to decide, what do you want out of the educational experience, right? Do you just want to have a better, more shallow knowledge across the entire space, or maybe some very specific deep knowledge in an area that's not software engineering specifically? So it could be more like cyber or DevOps related, which might not require a deep engineering background. Depends on what you want out of it. So I for most people say, what is the point? If you're going back to school, is it because you want to, burn your GI Bill? You're like, hey, I got GI Bill benefits. I got to use them. If I don't use them, then I lose them. I want to get a degree. What do I get a degree in? Okay. It could be that you want the housing stipend, or you want to have a degree, and that a CS degree isn't going to be the most important, but some of the companies that you're looking at require any degree in engineering related fields. Awesome. Might be easier. It might give you a more satisfying experience in that you're not having to do like the hardcore, assembly language and like all the other more challenging CS stuff. Now, if you're like, hey, I want to get into Google or other FANG companies like a Netflix or something, then I think like if you're going to do the degree, CS all the way. All the way. Okay, so if you have questions, the way this works is drop them in the comments. If you drop them in the comments, I will see them, and then I will do my best. I will take a shot at answering. And again, these are just my opinions. They matter in that I do hire lots of people, right? But I don't hire everybody. So the other organizations may view the process of screening candidates very differently than I do. I tend to take a little bit more progressive view than a lot of organizations. We're taking much more old school. You got to have a CS degree. It's got to be from a prestigious institution, right? Like I'm just a little bit more, because I have the capacity to, a little bit more flexible in the attributes that I'm looking for, because we can upskill people. A lot of organizations don't have that capacity. They don't have the ability to. So it's not you. It's not like they don't believe in you. They don't believe you can get better. What they're saying is, we're not well positioned to groom new people. We can only hire seniors because I have no ability to like make someone better. I have no ability to like invest in someone. I just need to hire someone that can come in and can do the work. So don't take offense at that. Don't be like, they don't want to give a new person a chance. Like, think about it this way. They're saving you from being in a toxic, terrible environment where you're going to come in and they can be like, why can't you do this? Why aren't you done with that yet? Why can't you figure it out? Okay, we're going to need to fire you because you're not getting any better. They're sparing you being in that environment. So look at it as a positive when someone says, you don't have enough experience, you are not going to fit in here. They're basically saying they can't skill people up. Because if they could bring someone in once they identify they've got good core qualities as an individual, as an employee. They are learning agile, they're gritty, they're diligent, they pay attention to details, hold themselves accountable, emotional intelligence, they have all those things. They just need more C# experience. Awesome. I can give them more C# projects. Let's go. That's what you probably want to hope for. And that's what we kind of do. But a lot of companies, they're not good at like the developing people. They're like, what? No, I need a senior engineer. So just be prepared for that. And that's the reason why I don't take it as it's not a personal affront, or like they don't like you or they don't think you're good enough. They just know they're going to be terrible at helping you out. This is one way to look at it. Another question that came up in the past was, I see Python listed and hearing that is the most popular language right now. Maybe it's debatable. Everybody's always got the popular list of things. Should I learn Python to be able to apply to more companies? Okay, so this is another like, should I learn? The answer to that is probably not. Probably you're okay with whatever you've learned so far. Keep using it, keep building passion projects, etc. I usually don't recommend that people learn another language so they have a good fundamental mastery of the first one that you've learned, so you feel pretty solid in the first language that you learn. Or if you've picked one that's like super obscure and someone has told you like, you probably want to learn something that's a little bit more in use, because you're going to have a hard time finding, a job with that particular language, right? So and depending on what that language is, it could make it easier for you to learn other languages. So if you learned your first language and your first language was like C is a very low-level language, and it should be very easy for you to pick up other languages after learning C. So you probably should invest in picking up another language, right? You learn C, you should be able to easily pick up Python, right? It should be hands down way easier. On the other hand, if you learn something like JavaScript, you're good. Just get really good at JavaScript. Work on mastering some front end libraries like Angular, React, Vue. Work on just getting better at Node on the back end. Maybe learn some TypeScript. You're good. I don't think you need to learn Python yet. There's a job opportunity. They hire you and they say it's a Python position. Great, learn Python. But I would shy away from thinking that by learning this other language, I'm going to open up all these other opportunities for jobs. Not really. You probably will just barely scratch the surface by the time you get an offer. And at that point, it would have been better for you to just like be better at the first language and then quickly ramp up on whatever that language, because it might not be Python. What if it's something else? What if the language that you end up getting your first job turns out it's like PHP, right? I know all the experienced developers, and they hear that, they're like, oh, PHP. I'm like, there's a lot of jobs out there that need PHP developers. So if someone's willing to give you some pay and experience coding every day, I'd take that offer. Well worth considering. Don't poo-poo programming languages. It's a tool. In some cases, it's the right tool for the job. All right, I don't see any other comments, questions coming through yet. I'll hang here for just a little bit. We're almost at the end of the backlog of questions. I like that. I'm clearing the log. So question from before, do all jobs require whiteboarding during the interview? I have terrible handwriting and get super nervous. What are some ways to get better at it? I think it means like interviewing in general, but maybe also the whiteboard. So practice. So I have a whiteboard on the wall just to the left of that refrigerator there. So I would say there's no substitute for actually standing up in front of a whiteboard and trying to do some code challenges. I know a lot of people that have they never actually used a whiteboard marker until I made them go stand in front of a whiteboard, and they were like, oh, wow, this doesn't feel the same way, or you can tell they're just not used to writing big and all that kind of stuff. So I just think that it's super helpful for you to get some experience, and you want to sort of work out the nerves and condition yourself to be able to still operate in that space of when you're nervous, because you're going to be nervous. So put yourself in that position and get used to dealing with it, get used to confronting that anxiety, that fight or flight, and be able to kind of work through it and still follow your process, right? You're going to restate the question to the person, make sure that you understand what some of the parameters of the, constraints of the problem are, what it is that they're looking for in the solution, drawing out your thought process, and then coding out your solution. You want to be able to execute even when you're nervous, right? So you don't have to have people throwing dodgeballs at you while you're doing it, but I would definitely really use whiteboard markers, really go through the exercise of trying to answer it. And if you can get someone to ask you questions and stand there and stare at you, that would be even more helpful, because it's that pressure of having someone stand there and just stare at you while you're trying to think that I think gets people a little off their game. So try and simulate it, try and get used to it. I think that would be the most helpful way to get better at it. I don't know of any courses or training that you need to go through. You just need more reps. More reps is almost always the answer, right? I feel like I'm like a PE coach. What's the answer? More laps. Take it on a lap. Let's see if that helps. Robbie, good to see you. Member of the JS community. What am I seeing in functional programming skills? Not sure what you mean by that, but I do see a pickup in demand. So I think the leading indicator of this is React, and React is flourishing, and I think people really like the functional programming aspect of React. And so I'm just overall impressed by people gravitating towards this paradigm and people really embracing thinking differently. Because for a long time, it was everything's object-oriented, and the way everybody thought about the right way to design solutions was to just everything's object-oriented. That's the business. But hopefully, I mean, if you have a more specific question, the skills required, I think people are getting a better sense of some of the the language around functional programming. So it's just becoming more common for people to know like what's a monad, right? Versus before, people were like, "What did you say? What was that word you said?" So I think it's helpful for people to know that, but I don't think it's super like game changing for beginners, right? I think they should understand that like functional programming is definitely a way to think about and solve some like implementations, but it's just I do enough JavaScript that I just know that it's just one of many different ways that you go about thinking about writing code, right? Just one style. So for those that are not familiar with that term, functional programming, there's functional, there's object oriented, there's imperative and declarative, and so I won't go through like what each of those and all those are right now. They're not super critical, other than to say that there are some languages that lend themselves to being like one of those or a couple of those, or some that are very flexible and you can write code in all of those different ways. So yeah, that's my general take. Hopefully, if you have a more specific question about functional programming, I can try and answer it, but feel free to drop a comment in there. Great to see you, Perry, as well. Everybody hopefully is surviving and thriving during COVID. So at least in your picture, you're smiling. So that's good. Roberto asks, what do you look for in a candidate with no prior experience in this field? How do you know they will have a good chance succeeding? Okay. So what we hire for specifically is we try and identify candidates that we feel like are going to be great employees. I like to think about it like instead of trying to find the best position player, we're trying to find the best athlete. Right? So we look for attributes that we think are strong signals that the person will be successful in our environment. So we try and look for things that tell us that the person is going to be resourceful, right? So it's counterintuitive, but like people that call or ask and they ask like very basic questions when the information is online, like that's kind of not a good thing. Kind of a really bad thing, actually, because it tells me that they're not willing to take the time and the effort to try and first be resourceful and see if the answer is out there first. And if it's not there first, then I like following up. And when someone asks me a question and I can say, oh man, that's right, that's not on the website. Awesome. That's awesome. But when someone like calls out of the blue and they're like, can you tell me about your apprenticeship program? I'm like, that's not a good sign, because it tells me the person is not taking the time to be curious and to investigate and to be resourceful. So hopefully that helps as you start thinking about like what is it that we think is important and critical for someone to be successful. We think those things that are hard to teach, like someone that is naturally curious, that wants to take things apart and understand how they work, someone that wants to do some digging, wants to do some research, and then ask thoughtful questions. Those are all things that we think are going to lend themselves to be successful not only in our program but also as software engineers. And I just have met and know lots and lots of software engineers, the ones that have those attributes and are curious and they want to know about things and they ask questions, but they ask thoughtful questions. Not, I don't want to call them lazy questions, but it's like when someone asks a question that's like super basic, like, is this a paid opportunity? It's like, I think if you read the website, you'd be able to figure that question out. It just means that like you haven't tried yet. You're, instead of trying to gain the knowledge yourself, you're a consumer and you want to consume the knowledge from other people. And that's a sign that person might struggle and may not succeed as a software engineer. Because as a software engineer, you're constantly going to have to be learning. Everything changes constantly. So you are constantly going to need to learn. And if you instead have a mentality of like, I want to be tutored, I want to have my questions answered, I want to be taught, I want to be shown, that is going to make your career in software engineering more difficult and challenging than if you say, I want to learn, I want to seek out the answer, I want to wrestle with problems, I want to try and solve things. You got to know when to give up and to ask for help. But you first and foremost want to actually like learn things and not be taught things. There's a nuance there. But hopefully that's helpful, because those are the kinds of things that we look for. And unfortunately, some people just they don't understand that, because they don't understand how vital those skills are to being successful as a software engineer. not just like maybe if you work super hard at it, you can be okay, but like you're going to thrive in this environment if you can just like live and embody the fact that every day you want to learn, every day you want to get better. So hopefully that helps, Roberto. Okay. Reactive and functional programming. Just wondering where the job market is. Job market's strong, especially with like, so Ember has always used this. Well, that's to some degree, it's also fairly declarative. But I would go back to React. I think like fundamentally the reason why I think React has been so successful is because it's a small library and it's really just exposing functional programming, and you just have to understand some of the higher order functions, not rack functions, returning functions, thunks and monads, and like once you get those functional programming concepts, you can build fairly quickly. And a lot of languages and libraries are going in that direction, wanting to sort of appeal to this way of thinking about things. So I think the market is pretty strong. I think Angular is moving more in the direction of like components and functional programming. And so I wouldn't see any reason why you shouldn't continue to like double down on getting super strong in those areas. And you've been coding for a while, so you're in a slightly different position than early people. I think if you've been coding for a while, I don't know that whether or not you have reactive or functional programming skills is going to be the difference maker between an offer or not an offer. But for your own personal interest, and if there's things that you think are like you just like it, right? You like thinking about solving problems in that way, then I think reactional and functional programming is it's a fresh breath of air when you compare it to like same old object-oriented stuff we've been doing forever. But just my 2 cents. Thanks, Perry. Appreciate it. Good to see you. All right. Any other questions? I got one more on my list, which means I think we're gonna crush the list, which is awesome. So we talked about whiteboarding. I'm over 40 and have been looking for a long time. It looks like no one is willing to give me a chance. What is your advice for people that are, so I think even older people that are career changers? So I think that a lot of the anxiety that older folks have that are transitioning to space is not, I don't want to say it's not well placed. It's not as significant as you might think it is. In some ways, it can actually work to your advantage. One way is that you might be, because of your age and the amount of time that you've been working in the industry, you might be eligible for a returnship, which is a special program that a lot of employers do because they want to be able to give an opportunity to people that are underrepresented, people that have some experience and a background with more work experience and may have been displaced because they raised a family or they're a primary caregiver. So they're out of the workplace and now they want to come back. And so there are a lot of organizations that do these programs. And so you qualify for a program that other people don't qualify for. So that could be one strategic advantage, right, of just your maturity and your age. The other thing to consider is that you oftentimes have some transferable skills from the prior industries that you may or may not have worked in. And so that could also be another strength that you bring to the table. So I wouldn't just focus on like, hey, most of the people here in this industry are young and I'm not young, so therefore I don't fit in. I think in many ways, if you just block that out, obviously there are going to be some organizations that might think, you're not a cultural fit because you don't want to go drinking and partying with, the 20-somethings that work in the marketing department. That may be part of the equation in terms of how folks are looking to screen candidates. But I would guarantee you that there are just as many other kinds of organizations out there that are focused on bringing people into the organization that have a diversity of thought, that can bring some experience. And so don't let it get you so anxious and so in your brain that you're not able to just focus on letting the real attributes that are actually important about you shine through and try and stay positive as much as possible. Don't worry too much about that as being a barrier. You can also look at it as an advantage in that they are incentivized. Organizations are incentivized to interview. It doesn't mean that they're going to hire you. They could be interviewing you just to show that they interviewed someone that was in the above 40 category, etc. So you got to make the most out of the opportunity if you're in the room, because someone said, oh yeah, you're over 40. Great. I get to check that box. I interviewed X number of people that are over 40, right? Take advantage of the opportunity when you get that foot in the door, crush that interview. So they can be like, oh man, and this person like had it together. So don't look at it as a negative. Turn it around. Turn that frown upside down. See if you can make it a positive. And I've had older folks that have completed programs and they all do fine. Once we have this conversation about like, just don't worry about that. I know you're anxious about it, but just focus on the things that actually matter. They usually get out and crush it. And in many cases, they get much better offers than earlier people because you're a trusted, known commodity. You're mature. You're not going to, do some of the things that someone with less experience may be inclined to do from like an employee standpoint, right? You're not going to no call, no show. You're not going to show up on a bender and not be able to work, all those kinds of things. So use it to your advantage. Don't think of it as a negative. Really think of it as a badge. Think of every one of those scars that you have as a, hey, this is a war story. Perry asks, tips on figuring what projects to work on when you have a projects block. Oh yeah, man. I used to recommend that you go to this site called 1K Projects. Now it might be called Indie Hackers or something like that. But yeah, go there and like just look and see what people are hawking. They're selling these projects for usually like around $1,000 or less. That means that the project's like about the size and scale that you probably could build some version or some small part of it within a couple weekends. It's usually where I suggest people stop. Don't try and build anything that's going to take you months. Try and build something that's only going to take you a few weeks. And then the other thing that you could do is Dribble is a great place where designers go for inspiration. You could see if there's anything there that you think, oh man, that looks amazing. Let me see if I could implement that user interface, right? And then more importantly, if there's a interface that maybe requires some backend service or something like a calculator of some kind, maybe you could create that, right? So I would try, when you're blocked, Dribble or 1K Projects. Those, I think, are two great places to spark some imagination and creativity. Or you can reach out to a local nonprofit and ask them, like, hey, do you need anything built? Do you have any problems that you'd like to have like a tool or a online solution for? And, pitch in and, maybe build a small business, something that could help them, get through COVID, keep some people's jobs alive. And you'd be surprised. Sometimes you're just like, man, can you just get Google Analytics working on our website? Yeah, sure. Drop that in there. No problem. Right. Or they might say, oh man, I wish I could just get these, orders from here to there. And you could just like set up Zapier or something for them. And they'd be so grateful. And doesn't even require that much coding. But you get to use your superpower, which is knowing that tech. All right, I think we are nearing the end of this hour. So that's it for this week. I will be back next week. I do this every Tuesday at 12 o'clock noon, called Looking for Work. And I hope this is helpful. If you are listening to this later, not live, join us live so you can ask questions in real time, and I can try and help you strategize and solve some of the little hurdles or little speed bumps, better metaphor, not fully hurdles. Just speed bumps on that journey that we all know is going to end in you getting a job offer, right? First week on the job at a tech company. You get those, you get to bring your dog to the office, and you get catered breakfast and lunch and haircuts and massages and limitless LaCroix in the refrigerator and, happy hours and unlimited PTO. That's a good one. You get a little view out on the balcony, and everybody's sipping on a little cooler. Yeah, right? Let's look forward to that. And then in between that, of course, you got to write some code, right? You got to write some code in between all that good stuff. But yeah. All right. We'll chat with you next week.